Bryant with Veritas Prep, and I'd like to welcome you to the MBA Admissions Workshop we're going to conduct for you today. We've got several people joining, in the process of joining, but I'm going to go ahead and get started since it's 1 o'clock in respect of everyone who is on a tight time schedule. Again, appreciate you joining us today. We're going to be talking about the ins and outs of B-School applications, and hopefully some of the information that you'll receive today will be helpful as you craft your own application. And certainly if you end up needing more help, I'll be happy to talk about some of the ways that we can help you do that as well at the end. So in the interest of time, what I'd like to ask everyone to do is if you would please jot down questions that you might have about anything that we go over today as we go. And then at the end, we will have a section for Q&A where we can address those questions. Generally ask that you try to keep those questions at a high level and not specific to your situation, just so that it's beneficial for everyone who's involved. And with that, let's just go over the agenda here. So we're going to be talking about several things today. Start out, we're talking about the competitive environment in the business school application world. Then we'll move into how you will be evaluated by the admissions committees. In part 3, we're going to go over what we call 3 goals of your application. We sort of boil it down to 3 key goals that everyone should have in their application. In part 4, we're going to talk about some of the top mistakes that are made as everyone applies. And in the end, we will address some of the ways in which we can help and have some questions and answers. So with that, let's dive into the competitive environment. So if this is your first year for applying to business school, and it doesn't have to be because lots of people come back and try again if they're denied admission. But if you're not a reapplicant and this is your first year, you may not know that there have been some changes in the recent years with business school applications. One of the biggest changes over the years has been that essays have become far shorter than they were in the past and far fewer. In fact, almost without exception, MBA programs are paring back the number of essays and the word count for each individual essay across the board. As an example, those of you who are applying to Harvard Business School, you already know that Harvard now actually doesn't even require a single essay. They have a 0 essay requirement. They do allow you to write an essay. It's an optional essay, and there were only about 10% of applicants last year did not write an essay, but 99% of them do. Even I said 10%. It's 10. Actually, 10 people. Only 10 people applied to Harvard last year without submitting an essay. So far and away, most people still write the essay, but there's only one, and it is optional. So that's just an example of how things have changed over the years. Harvard has sort of led the way on that front. They were the ones that kind of started heavily restricting the word count several years ago. And you may or may not recall that they began paring down essays from 1,000 words to 750 to 400 to 250. So other schools have followed suit, and I think the driver of this has mostly been just the voluminous amount of applications that they get and the man hours that they're required to crunch through them. So they want to read your application. They don't want to just dismiss you out of hand without giving you a fair shot. So and yet they wouldn't have time to read tens of thousands of applications. So what how they've compromised there is they've tried to just shorten everything over the years, and that goes for all the top schools. Another element of application that's increased in importance is because of this is everything else basically that you use to apply. So your online application form, your letters of recommendation, your resume, your interview, and then visiting the school and attending info sessions and reaching out to alumni, all these ways in which you probably were planning on getting yourself familiar with and applying to each school, those things now all increase in their importance now that there's not as much to say in the essay. So know that no part of the application is too small to ignore. It's not a simple matter of convincing them with the essays alone. Additionally, some of the changes have been in just new essay and interview formats. So several schools now allow you to submit multimedia presentations such as PowerPoints or even videos. I know there's Yale has an opportunity to submit a video And Chicago notoriously has asked for a PowerPoint presentation. May or may not keep up this trend over the years, but now they're allowing you to be a bit more creative beyond just a regular essay. There's also been some new interview formats that have popped up, including group discussions and then multiple rounds of interviews, and even some schools who provide a post-interview reflection time with them to sort of revisit with you. So they are trying new and exciting ways to get to know their applicants, because at the end of the day, that's their purpose in the application process. Of course, your purpose is to get into business school. Theirs is to get to know you. So they're trying to think of ways that crack the shell and get inside your head a little bit more than they have in the past. Certainly, another trend has been using admissions consultants. So this admissions consulting world kind of got cranked up in earnest about 10 or 15 years ago, and has grown ever since. And now as many as half of applicants to the top schools use paid consultant services to assist them with their application. So we've seen this trend as just a natural outcome from what happens when everything's elevated. So the GMAT scores have come up. Schools are getting tougher and tougher to get into. People have for many years have just wrung their hands over what they need to be doing to get into school. So this industry was born out of exactly that. So folks who gained some skill in navigating the process, started helping others, and it turned into a cottage industry, and now it's just a full-blown industry, much like the medical or legal field would be. If you're going to get some medical procedure done, you would certainly go to a doctor. If you're going to courts, you would probably want to be represented by an attorney. And we see that that's been kind of the trend in applying to not just business schools, but medical schools and law school as well. Okay, so another thing you've probably noticed if you're in the throes of preparing for the GMAT, which I'm sure many of you are, and that is the soaring average GMAT scores. So this awful test continues to get more and more challenging, and we'll just walk through some of the top schools and what they're scoring. So you may already know that Stanford is very proud of having the highest average GMAT score at a 729 last season. This sort of gives schools bragging rights about this intellectual capital that they're bringing into the schools. It doesn't really mean there's that much difference between the student body at Stanford and other schools. It just means that they happen to have folks that do well on this test. What it also means for applicants is in order to stand out, you want to try to score as high as possible, and that's pretty obvious. No surprise that Harvard is right there behind Stanford at 724. That's a negligible difference, of course, but they lose the bragging rights of being number one. Rest assured that when they make admissions decisions, they are not simply trying to pad this average. In fact, it comes out where it comes out every year. Harvard and Stanford are not just trying to pack top GMAT scores, because if they were, they would have an even higher average than this, because know that they could certainly fill their student body with 750 GMAT scores. And so they don't do that. They like to take a diversity of applicants, and that includes folks who don't score as highly on this test. Interestingly, you may not guess this, but NYU Stern, which many would not consider to be in the same category as Harvard and Stanford, is coming in third with the average GMAT score of a 720. Now, I'm sorry, they're not actually coming in third. There are some schools between NYU and Harvard and Stanford, but it's just, I put this on here just to point out how high the NYU Stern application process is, how high the score needs to be to get in there. The applicants in recent years and years past might have thought of NYU maybe as their safety and Harvard, Stanford, Wharton. And that's simply not the case anymore. With the average GMAT bumping up near these top schools, it's becoming more important than ever to have a high GMAT score if you're trying to crack the top 10 or 15 schools. This is really interesting to me. Like, look at this. You think of a school like University of California, Davis. It's certainly not a school that's likely on many people's radar unless you're living in Southern California or in the Southwest. But even a school like UC Davis is posting a 690 average. So UC Davis is a great school, but it's not in the top 10, and yet its average score would be a competitive score for an applicant in the top 10. So Just kind of goes to show you that it is getting more and more difficult to get into top schools. Now what about part-time? A lot of people think, well, you don't need as big a score to get into a part-time program, but look at Kellogg's part-time program, even in the part-time program, right up there, bumping up against the 700 on the GMAT. So all this to say, it is indeed very difficult to get into these top schools, especially with a lower GMAT score than you'd like. Now, one thing I would like to say about GMAT score and navigating the ins and outs of the business school application process is that you don't ever feel like you have to hit the average. These averages are posted, they're readily available, they're almost overemphasized in the media and on the internet. The schools themselves will be the first to tell you that this is simply the average. You do not have to get the average or above to get into the school or to get noticed. In fact, I think a better measure of what you should be targeting is probably what's called the 80% range of a school. So like a school like Stanford might have an 80% range of 650 to 750. And if you're in that range, then you're certainly in the ballpark and could consider applying to school if you're in the 80% range. Depending, of course, on the relative merit and strength of the rest of your application is going to play into how high on the GMAT that you end up having to score. So if you have a strong application outside the GMAT, then maybe your GMAT doesn't have to be as strong. And vice versa. If you have a few weaknesses, the GMAT can certainly help make up for that. Another thing I'll add about the competitive environment in the area of testing is that the GRE has become more commonplace. Whereas, 5 years ago, most schools wouldn't even accept the GRE as an alternative. Now, you're finding that schools will actually accept the GRE. And in some cases, if you're having a big hard time with the GMAT, but you can do well on the GRE, it's a pretty good strategy to submit the GRE in some cases, because schools, what they don't have to do is they don't have to include your GRE conversion score in their GMAT average. So if you have a bad GMAT, you're not going to pull that school's average down if you apply with the GRE score instead. So that's one strategy and a little inside tip for those who are having real trouble with the GMAT. Give the GRE a try and see if you've got a strong application otherwise. Maybe a good way to approach a school that you might otherwise not get attention from with your GMAT score alone. Okay, so having gone over some of the ways things have changed, let's talk about how you will be evaluated. So lots of people have figured this out already, and that is the key to this whole process is to try to put yourself in the shoes of the admissions officer. So if you have the admissions officer's perspective, you're going to be able to build your application around what you as an admissions officer would like to see. Now, be the first person to say this does not mean you should be trying to tell the admissions officer what you think they want to hear. You should simply think like an admissions officer and know that they are, in short, looking for a class with varied backgrounds and experiences. So like I said before in the prior slides, they're not just looking for someone who has a 4.0 and a high GMAT. They are looking for a well-rounded class with varied background and experiences. They know that diversity is paramount to a high-functioning, successful class environment. And so your simple goal there is to differentiate yourself from the other candidates who apply. If you stand out amongst others, then you will be noticed and you will perhaps be invited for an interview. And everyone knows that being invited for an interview is a big step towards getting accepted. And almost in no case will any business school accept someone without an interview. So being invited for an interview, especially at the schools who have invitation-only interviews, is a big sign of potential success there. So another thing admissions officers are looking for are candidates who fit within their specific program. So again, simply your goal is to demonstrate fit with the specific program, both culturally and professionally, so that you can show the school that you will work out well there. The school is a good fit for you and you are a good fit for the school. And we'll go over some of the ways to do that. Thirdly, candidates with attributes to become successful leaders in business school and beyond is another thing that admissions officers are looking for. So they don't just want folks who have done well in the past. They want to see evidence and propensity towards doing well in the future. And how you demonstrate that is what we think you should do is to show what we call balance across the 4 dimensions of a perfect applicant. And we'll go over those 4 dimensions in just a couple of slides here. Okay, so in summary, your goals, put very simply, boil down to 3, are to differentiate yourself from other candidates, and that boils down to, or begs the question of which applicants you're going to need to differentiate yourself against, and that is in the buckets and how you're evaluated, which we'll get into. Demonstrating fit with the program that you're applying to both culturally and professionally, and then showing balance across the 4 dimensions of a perfect applicant. Okay, so let's parlay those 3 things into goals for your specific application. So number 1, we talked about differentiating yourself. How you need to do that is basically with your profile, you're going to need to make yourself stand out from other applicants. Your profile consists of your academic background, your professional experiences, your personal interests and activities, and all of these things should be multifaceted and overall consistent with a theme. So it's great to have unique things. In fact, it's recommended that you have something unique in your background. But if everything in your background is unique to the point of being disjointed and disconnected, and it doesn't line up with your post-MBA goals, then the business schools may think that you're not ready for business school. So it should be fairly streamlined. Your academic background should have been a good preparation for what you've done professionally. The professional experiences should be progressively responsible and consistent with some kind of career trajectory or theme. And then your personal interest and activities, it's always great if those tie into your being a leader at the workplace. It doesn't have to be connected to what you do for a living, but the theme of being a leader in the community and being interested and passionate about things outside of work is important as well. So tying this all up and together into a narrative and a story that makes sense to the admissions committee is very important. If you fail to create a theme in your application, what kind of person are you, what kind of person you will be when you graduate, you're setting yourself up to become noise in the process. So a good exercise when you're beginning this application process is to just ask yourself, what defines you? Who are you? What makes you tick? What would you like the committee overall to know? What's your headline? So look at yourself from the 30,000-foot level and try to determine what are the things in your life that define you, how you work, how you lead, and make sure that those things are coming through in the way that you present your story to the admissions committee in the application. Now, getting into the buckets, of course, to differentiate yourself, you don't have to stand out amongst all 15,000 applicants. You simply have to stand out in comparison to other students with a similar background as yours, because business schools are going to put you in buckets according to your ethnicity, according to your academic background, according to your professional background, according to your post-MBA plan. They're going to kind of put you into various silos and then compare you kind of more apples to apples against others who are coming from similar industries or from similar backgrounds. Sorry, my phone was acting up here. Okay, so this right here is an interesting chart. You see the pie chart is carved up of the class of, this is the incoming class for Harvard of 2014. So these are folks who got into Harvard and accepted the offer. These are not applicants to Harvard. These are not those who were extended an offer and denied. These are folks who actually matriculated at Harvard Business School last year. So this is real data from Harvard. And you see basically the breakdown of last year's incoming class to HBS in the various industry backgrounds that they had before they got in. So you see that the top 1, 2, 3, 4 categories, consulting, venture capital, financial services, and government education and nonprofit, made up just over half of the whole application class, of the whole matriculating class. So if you are applying to Harvard, say, and these numbers change from every year, of course, but if you're applying to Harvard this year, you can expect it to be fairly similar, and you're in consulting. Just know that you're going to have a very, very large application pool to compete against for a seat at Harvard Business School. Similarly, in venture capital, which frankly was more like in the 4 or 5% range just a few years back, it's now bumped up to, there's lots of folks going back to school apparently that are from that industry. And whereas it was very unique a few years ago to be a VC person or a PE person, you could probably have gotten into any top school fairly easily with decent qualifications if you're from that industry. Now it's sort of just another of thousands who are applying from that industry. So all this to say, you need to be cognizant of where you're coming from, and you think about, how do I stand out against another consultant that does something similar to me? How do I stand out against another private equity person who works in a similar capacity that I do? So you may think you're very unique because you crunched through some major deal in your PE firm last year, but know that now there's lots of other folks who have done the same thing. So you really got to recalibrate your mindset around this thought of positioning yourself against someone else who looks exactly like you on paper, basically. And that's where standing out gets more difficult. Now, certainly, if you work your way down and starting at the bottom, let's say, if you're from the military or if you're in energy sector, certainly in the past couple of years, consumer products or some kind of other industry that's not sending as many people to business school these days, it does help you stand out. So you're applying in a smaller pool, smaller bucket, and you do have some advantages there. And in short, you basically just need to be aware of where you're coming from and who you're competing against. So you might want to try to get on the internet and do some research, try to find out for your specific target school what that pie chart looks like. And so you'll be prepared to apply and position yourself accordingly. Okay, so goal number 2, we talked about demonstrating fit. So this is very important. It's something that's often sort of glossed over by applicants, but fitting with a school means that you're demonstrating a variety of things, including academic fit, cultural fit, and professional fit. So firstly, academic fit, you have to prove to them that you're going to succeed in the program. So if you're applying to Wharton and you have a 600 GMAT, you're going to have some real challenges because they're not going to see you as a good academic fit there. Similarly, even if you have a 700 on the GMAT and you're applying to Wharton, if you went to East Lake College, out, in the middle of nowhere, unranked undergraduate institution, they're going to figure that in and sort of consider that when you apply. So academic fit mostly is going to center around your past performance in school, and that's graduate school and undergraduate school, and also your performance on the GMAT. Those two combined things are going to send a signal to the school on whether you fit or not. And as I said, it's a little more mathematical. If your score is in the 80% range of that school, if your GPA is pretty close and you went to a rigorous school, or in the best case, a top 25 college or a top 50 college in the U.S. or abroad, then you're going to find yourself more competitive than others who have attended lesser institutions or have not done as well. Now, you can make up for one or the other. So if you went to a school that wasn't quite as rigorous, let's say it's a top 100 college instead of a top 50 college, but you got a really high GMAT score, you could still slide in, especially if that the time you went to college was a long time ago. So if you're fresh out of college, it's more challenging because that work experience is not going to be there. But if it's been a while and your GPA is a little lower, they're going to consider that less. In fact, I often consider GPA to be one of the most flexible items on the application because it's not an apples-to-apples comparison. Certainly everybody knows that if you majored in engineering at Georgia Tech, then you probably are going to have lower grades than if you majored in philosophy at, wherever else, University of the South. So those things are all taken into consideration. That's why they ask for your transcript, and that's why you need to make sure you're being realistic about how you're looking at your background, and make sure that you try to compensate for any shortcomings or weaknesses that you might have in that area. How do you compensate? Well, specifically in the academic area, if you have a low GMAT score and you have a sketchy academic background, you're probably going to need to build what's called an alternative resume. alternative transcript. So it may mean that you have to take a year and go get some classes knocked out, graduate level classes in either mathematics or statistics or accounting or finance, just to demonstrate that you've got the academic firepower to handle a program. Because at the end of the day, these schools mostly just want to know that you've got the ability to handle the curriculum, because the very worst thing that can happen is for you to get in over your head, fall behind in classes. Not only are you not doing well, but you're also at that point dragging your classmates down, because you're supposed to be feeding off each other and helping each other. If you've got nothing to offer in the way of academic fit, then schools are going to pass on you. So let's take a really realistic look at this, and certainly we can talk more in detail specifically about your situation one-on-one if that's your desire. Okay, so cultural fit, what does that mean? Schools all have a different personality and a different culture. I always chuckle when I see students or applicants applying to Stanford and Harvard because they pick them out of the top two schools in the country, or top 2 or 3. Really, culturally, Stanford and Harvard could not be more different. And so if you're a good cultural fit for Harvard, you're probably not a good cultural fit, frankly, for Stanford, and vice versa. So it's interesting to see candidates who apply to both, because it tells me that they may not have done their full measure of research on these schools and visited and tried to figure out where they fit in. Stanford's very entrepreneurial, very touchy-feely. They have classes out there that Harvard would never have about, what color is your parachute type things. And Harvard is a little more straight-laced, a little more traditional, certainly all case method. Certainly the environment's a bit more competitive with each other, with the students. And it's just overall a much different culture. So every school wants to know that you're going to become an active contributor while you're there, that you're going to participate, that you're going to be in clubs, you're going to lead clubs, you're going to leave something behind that'll make the school a better place. And that's the things that they're looking for in the applicants. What kind of thinking have you done? What kind of plans have you made to contribute to the school's culture while you're there? How and why will you be a good fit with the Harvard tradition or the Stanford tradition? Now, finally, with demonstrating fit, you want to make sure that you're showing a professional fit with the school's curriculum and with the school's history. So specifically, how does your post-MBA plan fit and will be leveraged by the curriculum that's offered at that school? So, an easy example is if you're interested in healthcare and you're applying to a school that doesn't have some kind of healthcare program or classes, then school's going to see that right away as a bad professional alignment with their curriculum and what you want to do. So make sure that you vet out the schools and know that certainly you'll get what you need from any top business school program. But if you have some specific goals, such as becoming a marketing person or becoming a healthcare person or an energy person, you got to make sure that the school has the kind of fit that's going to set you up professionally to succeed. And if you're off there in the application, you're going to use that as a reason to reject you. Now, essentials for demonstrating this fit with the schools. First and foremost, you're going to need to have well thought out short and long-term goals. In fact, the inability to articulate post-graduation goals is frequently a major factor in a candidate's rejection in the admissions process. So if you're using business school to, quote-unquote, figure yourself out for 2 years and decide at the end what you want to do, that is a big, big red flag with business schools. They are looking for people who are not fully mature in their career and in their plans, and using that as a quick way to throw out applications, because it's very easy for them to say, come back next year when you have things figured out. So please put a lot of time into planning these short and long-term goals. Now, I will say short-term goal is not to go to business school. So short-term goal is what you're going to do immediately after business school. So what job will you take at the end of that 2-year business school run, and how will that job prepare you for what your long-term goal is? If you've got a plan that's totally disconnected from what you've done in the past, you better have really, really good explanation why you're still going to be able to succeed in that goal. Because yes, people do use the MBA as a way to change careers. It happens a lot. But you're going to need to demonstrate that you've got the potential to make that change happen, and that the things you've done in your past are going to be attractive to potential employers on the back end. Otherwise, schools are not going to touch you with a 10-foot pole. In fact, several schools now are even allowing or asking their career services department to co-interview with applicants with them. So these career services folks, whose job is to try to align you with recruiters at the end and get you a job, they want to know who they're bringing in, and does this person have, are they employable? Are they good in an interview? Are they going to represent the school well on the back end when people come on the campus to try to hire and recruit people? So having these goals lined up and spelled out is going to really help you. In fact, if there's a big misalignment with what you want to do, and the career services person or the admissions person sees it as unattainable or unrealistic, then it's an easy way to get rejected. So certainly an extreme example of this would be if you're a history teacher and you want to come back and work in private equity as soon as you get out of school, then that's going to show a lack of immaturity. It's going to show, a lack of maturity is going to show poor judgment on your part, because clearly you've not done the research to know that very few private equity firms recruit freshly minted MBAs, especially those who have zero experience in that area. So just make sure that these goals make sense, that they're interesting, and that they line up with what you've done. Now, you're also going to need a crystal clear explanation for why you want an MBA and why it makes sense now. So the why MBA and why now question is some version of that question is going to be on probably every business school application that you come across. And lots of people mess this up because they end up telling the schools that they want an MBA and that they want it now, but they don't really go into why and good reasons for why. So if you don't have a compelling case for why now is the right time and why you need an MBA, then schools will certainly pass on you. Thirdly, you want to give credible reasons for why you've applied to each school. So this ties into demonstrating fit with each particular program, culturally, professionally, and academically. And so when you think through all that, it's going to result in some reasons, which are hopefully are credible, for why you're choosing this school to apply to. Visit the school, can't emphasize that enough. They're not necessarily going to give you any brownie points for doing so, but it will help you tremendously as you apply, because there's nothing like an in-person visit to expose you to the true culture and the feel for the school, and it'll give you lots of things to write about in your application. Finally, as we discussed in the prior slide, you're going to need to describe to them how you will contribute to the community. And not just the community while you're in business school, but also to your general community when you graduate. So they want to bring in people who are engaged. That's why it's important to have extracurricular involvement when you apply, because they're looking for folks who've done that, are engaged in the community now, because they figure that's the best evidence for being engaged in your community in the future. Certainly they want you to be plugged in while you're in business school, and it helps to have some good ideas of how you might think you will contribute while you're there. Maybe you'll lead the finance club, or maybe you'll take a group of folks up to New York, where you're from, and show them Wall Street, or lead an international trip, some kind of global academic experience. Maybe you can lead that, or you can start a new club. It doesn't have to be an academic or professional club either. Maybe you're played soccer for 20 years and coach soccer, and you want to start a soccer club. I mean, there's already one most likely there, but you can certainly lead that club. But suffice it to say, you need to put some thought into how you're going to contribute, and also have some evidence for being a person that does that in general. Okay, so let's get down to what we call the 4 dimensions of a perfect applicant. We touched or telegraphed that we were going to do this earlier, and so I'll just spell them out for you here. If you have these 4 pillars represented in your application, then you're going to be setting yourself up for a competitive run at top schools. So the 4 pillars of a good application are leadership, innovation, teamwork, and maturity. So you want to be showing these throughout your application, and not everything you show in your application are going to be demonstrative of each of these individually, But as long as you have a balance of these four things in your application, then you're going to be positioning yourself in the best possible way. Certainly all business schools are looking for leaders. To the extent you've been a leader in the past, that's, again, the best evidence for what you will do going forward. So if you are in the fortunate position to be in charge of people at where you work and to manage others, that's certainly a great vote of confidence from your employer, and a great piece of evidence for business schools that you have leadership potential and ability. What I find most often with clients is that there's a lot of folks who don't have that, so they don't have direct reports, they don't have people that have to answer to them, so they have to dig a little deeper for how they show leadership in the workplace, and the list is long of ways you can do this. Certainly showing thought leadership is an alternative way to show that you have the potential to lead others. Thought leadership can be demonstrated by telling stories about how you convinced management to do a process differently, or to make a change, or you managed a change that worked well, or you led your peers. Peer leadership is another way to show leadership in the workplace. How do you lead when you're not in charge of something? How do you build consensus? How do you get others on board with a project? All these things can show that you've got leadership potential. And certainly painting those in a narrative for the admissions committee will be helpful. Innovation is another thing that's important to demonstrate. So another way to look at this is just general creativity. So how resourceful are you? How creative are you in the workplace or outside of work? What kind of things can you tell them that demonstrate that you're a creative thinker, that you think differently than the average person? You don't have to have a patent in your name or an invention selling in the marketplace to prove that you're innovative, but you do have to show creativity and the ability to think creatively, which is a big part of a successful business school student and a successful business person. Another big important pillar in this process is demonstrating that you have teamwork skills. So if you are on a team at work, or if you work in an industry that requires a team, consulting is a good example. You generally work on a consulting team, software design team, different engineering team, whatever industry you happen to be in. Often it's fairly easy to show that you've got projects at work where you work with others. Certainly if you have a job that's historically considered to be kind of solo effort or individualistic, then you want to try to come up with ways that prove that you can play well in the sandbox with others, because that's a big part of business school. In fact, I would say that most work at business school is done on some kind of team projects, case studies, classroom participation. All these things are done on a team. So if you don't have much evidence of teamwork, they may question your readiness for business school, because you're going to have to transition to an environment where it's mostly things are done on teams. And of course they know the reason for that is because in the real world you've got to work well with others. So if you were going to go out and be a sole practitioner and do your own thing, then you may not even need business school. So this is something that's important to demonstrate. Finally, we feel that maturity is important as well, and this is an area that a lot of folks kind of don't think about. Lots of things can demonstrate that you're mature enough for business school. One is that you have an appropriate amount of work experience, so certainly your age and your number of years in the workplace can automatically kind of show some maturity. But beyond that, and especially if you don't have a lot of years under your belt, you can show maturity by simply having a very crystallized vision for what you want to do, and a good perspective on your place in the world and how you fit in and how you plan to fit in going forward. Another way to show maturity is by being able to discuss your failures and the things that you're working on and that you need to improve, and having a perspective on not having all the answers, but still showing room for improvement. If you frankly have no failures that you can talk about, then they're going to look at you as not mature enough for business school. Like if you've been out in the world long enough, you're going to be able to point to a failure somewhere. And if you haven't ever had a failure, then either A, you're not mature enough for business school, or B, you probably don't need business school, frankly, because if you've never had a failure, just go out there and hit home runs, because business school will be a waste of 2 years for you. But suffice it to say that all 4 of these pillars are critically important to demonstrate. And if there's any one area where you lack, you can use what we call this balanced scorecard to try to shore up your application. So I encourage you to just make a simple note of this method, and that is to list the 4 dimensions of a perfect applicant across the top of a grid, and then down the left side, list some of your profile characteristics, your GPA, your GMAT, your things that you do at work and your professional experience that are interesting, things you do outside of work, extracurricular activities, some of your international experience, and then go across the grid and check off what you think that particular thing demonstrates. So you see this person as an example had a low GPA in college. Well, right away that's going to probably indicate that they're not all that resourceful or creative or able to sort of think outside the box, because they weren't able to pull off good grades in college, which we all know takes a certain amount of savvy. But they were certainly nailing the GMAT, so they get a check for being resourceful, certainly mentally resourceful and clever in that category, so that can kind of balance that out. But innovation, as I said, goes beyond that as well, and so certainly being selected to lead the customer experience team can show that you're creative and that you've got ideas that are interesting to others. That profile characteristic just happens to also show leadership, teamwork, and maturity. So you see this person was able to check all 4 boxes there. But, you know, you don't have to, everything doesn't have to check all 4 boxes, I guess is the simple way to say that. But at the end of the day, you need to have sort of a balance of check boxes here. So in this person's case, you see they really only have a couple of things that are showing that they're innovative. So, you know, this person may want to go back and try to beef up their application in the area of innovation. They're showing, you know, some decent leadership, teamwork, and maturity, however. So I would encourage you to use this kind of exercise to make sure you're hitting on all 4 cylinders there. Okay, so let's talk about some of the top mistakes that are made in the application process. I'm not sure if anybody would be able to guess what the #1 faux pas as reported by MBA admissions officers is, but far and away, every year, it's careless mistakes in the application. So, you know, in the essay you say, I'm really excited about coming to Harvard because Kellogg is my top choice. It happens every year, and it will continue to happen, but don't let that happen to you. Don't be that person that makes this careless mistake. These folks read essays for a living. They can pick out comma splices and format mismatches from a mile away. So make sure you're going over your application with a fine-tooth comb, and also that you let someone else go over it, because after you read something 100 times, which you certainly will have done by the time you submit, you might be missing something that someone else can see with a fresh set of eyes. Another mistake that's made is a simple inconsistency between institutional choice and your educational objectives and ambitions. So this is a mismatch between school and you. So talking about fit earlier, this is when you don't fit between the school you've chosen and what you're saying you want to do afterwards and what you've done in the past. Again, that's a very common mistake that's made and something that you should try to avoid. This is not as common as it was in the past because most applications are all digitally done now. However, students still continue to creatively include things that haven't been requested. The most common one would probably be extra letters of recommendation that are just sent unsolicited to the admissions office. Business schools see this as kind of you trying to get an unfair advantage over the next guy. I mean, certainly if I had the chance to get 6 or 7 people to go tout my qualifications, I would have a better shot than someone who's only allowed to have 2 people vouch for them. So what you want to do is try to stick to only what's asked of you in the application and never ever include anything beyond that. Finally, and most importantly, the common mistake in the application process is inappropriate interview conduct. So when you show up to the interview, make sure that you're dressed appropriately, make sure you make eye contact, make sure you're well groomed, and that you're treating them professionally, and you're not saying anything that would be a red flag. You know, a good example might be if they ask you about what your definition of diversity is, and you say you think the diversity is really just a politically correct joke. You know, things like that. If you can really bomb an interview if you say things that are inappropriate, obviously. So that counts among the top 4 mistakes that are made. Now, I want to quickly run through how we can help you in this process. Certainly, there's plenty of consultancies out there, but we've been around for over 10 years, and we think we're the best, as I'm sure everyone does. But we have several reasons why we think that. There's some information here on how you can actually take advantage of a discount that we're offering this season. If you email info@veritasprep.com by midnight tonight, you can actually save money on a consulting package. And if you call the 1-800 number there, you can ask for a discount code that can be redeemed by Friday as well. So please take advantage of that. You will be able to get this this presentation afterwards, by the way. So if you don't have time to jot that down, you can get it later. But real quickly about the Veritas team, we are an industry-leading team. We have elite consultants from the top business schools worldwide, and Veritas focuses on hiring only former admissions committee members, professional writers, and current industry leaders who have graduated from top schools and navigated the process themselves, and also have helped others navigate the process. So you will be handled by a top consultant who's got several years of experience in the workplace and has graduated from a top business school. In fact, only Veritas Prep goes to great lengths to match you with the right consultant. So it's not just a random thing. Your head consultant, in fact, will generally have some kind of experience, maybe that's in line with yours, or some kind of background that is similar to yours, so that they can help you real specifically on how to structure your application. And then you're also given a school specialist, which I think is the most valuable part of this, the Veritas process, which is in addition to your head consultant, you're also given a school specialist for each school that you're applying to who actually graduated from that school and can give you school-specific insight through our comprehensive school package. Now, how do we match you with the right consultant? Well, we ask you to take a Myers-Briggs personality assessment right off the bat, and this is a great expense to us, frankly. It doesn't cost you anything, but I had to take it as well as an admissions consultant, and so they take my profile and they try to use the profile from the Myers-Briggs personality assessment to kind of get you lined up with someone who leverages your personal strengths in the application process. So it's also got some questions just for you that you can use, and you'll get a report that's generated that's a game, it helps outline at least a stage 1 game plan for you based upon your personality and your background. This is very, very helpful, and this was we just started doing this about a year ago, and have seen some tremendous success from utilizing these tools, these psychological tools, to help you generate the best application possible. There's an option for just about everybody out there. Certainly, if you need help from soup to nuts, then a comprehensive package is really good value, because you get unlimited access to your head consultant, and you also get, as I said, consultative time with as many consultants as you have schools in the package. If you don't feel like you need all that help, if you kind of already chosen your schools and you kind of know how to position your story fairly well, and then an hourly package might be a good option, where you just work with a specialist maybe that graduated from your target school on specific areas of the application that require, where you require the most help. And then finally, if you want to do it all on your own, but you just want an extra set of eyes on your essays before you submit them, we have a comprehensive essay evaluation and editing service where you can get written feedback on your essays, and then 2 hours of one-on-one consulting times in kind of a streamlined package there just for the written material. In addition to that, you can just hire us hourly. So if you just want to do a mock interview, or if you want to just get an hour of on the phone with somebody, you can certainly call up our office, and they'll pair you with a consultant they think is a good fit, and to kind of talk you through anything that's giving you trouble. But with that, I appreciate your time and attention. what we're going to do now is kind of turn it to questions. And if you have any questions, you can certainly type them into the question box on your screen there, and I will try to get to as many as I can in the next few minutes. Again, if I can remind folks who joined late, if you could keep the questions to a high level and not specific, that's going to help everybody on the call, because there's several hundred people registered for this call. So the more specific your question is, the sort of less likely it's going to help other people. So if you do have specific questions, then if you would call that 800 number and just ask for, we actually give a 1-hour free diagnostic chat for anybody who wants to talk about their situation, and you'll be paired with someone, a consultant who will talk to you for free and can give you, specific answers to your questions. Let's see here. Let me try to open up this question box. Why can I not open this up? Okay, here we go. So let's see. We've got some questions coming in now. Thank you for doing that. I'll just start at the top here. Can you describe what makes a successful top 10 school who is only out of undergrad for 2 years? Yeah, that's a question we get a lot. For some reason, we have a lot of people every year that are just bucking to go back to business school at the point where lots of business schools determine that they're not ready. So if you've only got a couple of years of experience, and certainly there are occasions where schools will let in someone with less experience, but generally speaking, you're going to have to be standing out in that experience. So it's got to be pretty unique experience, and something that they perceive as contributing a lot of value in the classroom. So if you have done something very intense for a couple of years, or let's say you worked full-time in China as a U.S. citizen and just did something really exciting and it really ties into your post-MBA vision, and you can explain why now is the right time, you can still get in with less experience. But just know that on average, they're going to be a lot more, they're going to scrutinize a lot more your background and what you've done and what you're bringing to the table. But if you can do that, then certainly you can get in with less experience. Here's another question that says, what do you suggest to be sure that our experience and resume fits the B school to which we're applying? Well, again, you want to do a lot of research on the school. So you want to visit the school in person. You want to look into the professors that teach there, maybe read some of their published research. You want to go visit a class, talk to the students about what it's like in the classroom environment, look at the offering, the curriculum offering, and see what's required. For example, Duke University has the Fuqua School of Business. They have they have 4 short terms instead of 2 semesters. They have like 4 mini semesters where you actually take more classes. And for someone without a business background, sometimes they like a school like Duke where they can end up taking more business classes because they didn't have those as undergrads. So that's a good example of how you can begin to dive into these schools and see what their curriculum looks like and see if it's a good fit for what you need. Certainly, if you're an undergraduate business major, you may not need all those extra classes. So, Duke may not be your top choice there, unless you just have a whole bunch of electives you want to take, in which case maybe it is. So that's just the kind of research that you need to do. Next question is, how would you view the reduction in the number of essays required at many top schools this year? How would you view the reduction in the number of essays required? Does that mean that the interview is more important? Yes, I said that at the beginning. You may have joined late. Everything else in the application has been elevated in its importance because of the essays. And what you'll find is they still give you a chance to talk about yourself, but they do so in like shorter questions and limited character counts. So whereas you might just have an essay or 2 or 3 and short ones at that, they're going to be asking questions in the application itself that might ask, what are your short and long-term goals? Whereas that used to be a whole essay at some schools. Now they just sort of ask you to condense that down to a few sentences, and everything else, including your resume, and your recommendations and all this has just become more and more important. Okay, so how does an applicant demonstrate fit to their particular school on a cultural perspective? Can you provide some examples? Yeah, culture is a little more difficult to define. I look at it more like the school's personality. So, for example, if you're a very competitive person and you like, the iron sharpens iron technique and just challenging each other and trying to better each other in the process, and that's good for you. You like that kind of competitive environment. Then a school like Harvard, is a great choice. If you're and in a school like Duke, for example, or Kellogg, which is considered a little more friendly environment. I mean, not that Harvard's not friendly, but it's just less competitive. The culture is less competitive at Fuqua and Kellogg. So the old example I like to give is like you go to Harvard and you go in the library, in the business library, to try to find the answer to a question the professor's challenged you with, and you track down for days, and you finally find the right book. You go to the book, you turn to the page, and the page is torn out. Because somebody beat you to it. Whereas at Fuqua, you might find you go down the bulletin board and someone has Xeroxed the page from that book and posted it for everyone to see. So, there's just cultural differences kind of flesh themselves out in different ways, but academically, that's certainly one way. Where schools are kind of ties into culture. So like a school like NYU Stern is going to have less of a bonding culture in some ways because, it's in New York City and a lot of people commute in, and they don't live right there nearby. So when the class is over, they're scattering to the four corners of Manhattan. And a school like that's a little more remote, like Tuck, out in the middle of Hanover, in the middle of nowhere. There's nowhere to go, so the students end up sort of spending day and night together and getting a lot of bonding out. So that's another way that there's a cultural fit. Cultural fit can also manifest itself in the makeup of the student body. So if there's a low percentage of married students at this particular school, you can count on them being kind of more fun maybe in the after hours, kind of going out and having, going out to dinner together and having fun. But if there's more married folks with kids and families, they may not be connecting as much outside the classroom. But if you have a family, you're going to have folks to connect with because there'll be other people like you and blah, blah, blah. So those are the kind of things you need to look at for cultural fit. Okay, so just going down the line here, how much more competitive are STEM candidates and non-STEM candidates for HBS specifically, applying to 2+2? They're actually STEM candidates at first were very much more competitive for 2+2 at HBS because that's what the program was kind of designed for initially. Now they've kind of broadened that out to sort of take any academic background, so it's not as much of an advantage anymore. They're looking more for the whole package, and if you're a history major with some solid profile characteristics, then you can still get into the 2+2. How late in the round should you apply before deciding to just apply next round? As long as your application is complete and the best it can be, you can submit it on the day it's due and be fine. The only thing I would use as a litmus test there is the application as good as it can be? If it can be better, if you can improve your application, then you can defer to the next round. With the caveat of the third round, if you're in the second round and you're struggling with whether to get it in on time, do everything you can to get it in on round 2 because round 3 is very, very difficult. Rounds 1 and 2 is kind of a toss-up. I belong to a country where there's percentage system, not GPA. How do you suggest converting? The schools themselves will do that for you. You don't have to worry about it. They all are very familiar with international applicants in the schools they come from, so they will have their own system for converting GPA. You can reach out to the admissions committee office, or the admissions office, and ask them, and they will help you if it comes down to what you type in the box for conversion. But you want to do each school individually there because there's no general way to convert those GPAs. Is a career in a VC or consulting firm justify a long-term goal for an entrepreneur whose long-term goal is entrepreneurship? Again, venture capital and private equity is a challenging short-term goal for anyone because those firms simply don't recruit very much for freshly minted MBAs. So if you're going to do that, you're going to have to come up with a plan, have a plan, an action plan in place for how you're going to get that job on your own, basically, because private equity firms and VC firms don't show up to the schools to recruit like banks and consulting firms do. So you're going to have a nice plan for how you're going to make that happen. And if you can convince them that your plan's going to work, then they'll give you a shot. I mean, certainly it's a little less of a stretch now that 20% of the incoming class has a background in that field, so you can certainly draw from folks who are your classmates on inside tips and connections and how to get access to those kind of jobs. But just know that the VC world is very reluctant to hire fresh MBAs without any prior experience, especially in that field. Is there any weakness in the story from an applicant with an accounting background looking to transform into finance? No, Alex, the MBA as a way to try a new career is common. You just need to make sure you have a plan and a story and a vision that makes sense. So transitioning from accounting into finance, that is not a stretch at all. It certainly can happen. In fact, accounting is a great foundation and background for finance. So what you want to talk about is why you want to do that. And I touched on this a little earlier, but the why is probably the most important thing in the application process. Most applicants talk about what they want to do, but they fail to tell why they want to do it. So if you can explain in a compelling narrative way why you want to make that transition, then you'll be much more likely to get attention than someone who just simply talks about, okay, here's my plan, I'm going to do this, this, and this. So don't miss the why, and you'll probably be able to stand out a lot more readily in the process. Okay, so most B schools on average require 48 months work experience. I only work 12 months, planning on working 24 will be a problem. Yes, certainly if you're talking about a top school, 12 to 24 months, they're going to be really, really picky. And I think I touched on that earlier. If you have further questions about that in your specific situation, it would probably take a kind of an evaluation of your specific work history to tell if it's going to be attractive or not. But in general, if you've got 1 or 2 years, it's more challenging these days. You got to understand that a big part of business school is what you're pulling from your classmates. So someone with 1 year work experience is certainly going to get a lot of value from their classmates, but are their classmates going to get a lot of value from you is the question. And you've got to prove to the admissions committee that you've done enough in a year that's going to be considered valuable to your classmates who have 5 or 6 years of experience. And that's sort of the way you have to be looking at it. Okay, what do schools look at when deciding? What do schools look at if your GMAT score is acceptable? Oh, there's a grammatic mistake there. Deciding if your GMAT score is acceptable, do they care more about the total score or the individual scores? At what point should one consider retesting versus strengthening the rest of their package? Can a high GPA fill off lower GMAT score? All these are good questions. There's not really a straight up answer for the jumping off point. If you're outside of the 80% range of a school, then you want to be concerned and consider retaking. If you're trying to get into a top school, like a top 10 school, and you're sort of in the middle and your score's not really, it's fine, but it's not gonna blow them away, or it's not gonna be like, let's say you have a 670 on the GMAT and you're trying to get into a top school. I mean, 670 is a great score, make no mistake, but it's not going to get them jumping up and down as a way to pad their average. So if you have a score kind of in sort of no man's land, which is good but not great, then that's a good time to consider retaking, but only if you think you can better the score. Certainly at this point in the game, there's plenty of time to maybe prepare and take it again, but if you're bumping up against deadlines, you'd be probably better off preparing a better application. And then at the end of the day, if you simply can't get higher scores, it might be time to evaluate whether you're a good academic fit for the school. If you have a low GPA and a low GMAT, that's going to limit the access that you're going to have to top schools, because they tend to take, students with better academic qualifications. So you can try, but just know that your odds of admission go down commensurate with lower scores in GMAT and GMAT's GPAs. But yes, you can offset one with the other. But a good example I try to use is you can't, if you get a 4.0 GPA, but it's at some crappy college, that's not gonna offset a low GMAT. They're gonna take into consideration the rigor and reputation of your undergraduate school. So if you got a 4.0 at Emory University or at Harvard or 4.0 at UCLA, then yeah, that can certainly help offset a lower GMAT score. which business schools are good for a strategy preference? Well, you know, Judy, the strategy is a core part of the business school curriculum at any business school. Sort of like, you know, corporate finance, you know, will be in marketing and accounting. So there are certainly schools that you know shine in different areas, but in the way of strategy, you're going to find top schools are going to all be probably appropriately beneficial to you in that area. Especially what you want to look for really is the recruiting statistics and see which schools do the top consulting firms recruit from, and that's going to give you a good indication of which schools are better at strategy. You can also do some reading on their academic faculty and see who's published, who's respected in a simple Google search, and just kind of try to get to the bottom of it that way. But all the top 10 schools are gonna check the box in strategy. All right, Rahul's getting a little specific here, but that's okay. With the Quant 48 and Verbal 40, is this score good enough to apply to top schools? You know, you didn't say what your overall was, but I'm assuming that's going to be pretty good with that. Yeah, I mean, the quant score, I didn't go into this earlier, the quant score is going to be more important to the fact that you have you know, top schools are going to look for 48, 49, 50 quant. They like to see that. If you've got a 44 quant, 45 quant, you're not going to be as excited. Why is that? Well, it's because the curriculum is simply pretty quant heavy, and quantitative skills are not anything you can just sort of whip up at the last minute. So you've either kind of got a propensity and a natural tendency to do well in those kind of subjects or not, and the GMAT kind of exposes that. So I would say a 48 quants, and then certainly in the ballpark there, a good quant score will be impressive. I don't know, you know, sometimes, you know, your name looks Indian, don't want to make any jump conclusions here, but I will say that, like, the Indian applicant pool and Asian applicant pool has typically high GMAT scores. So if you've got a 48 quant, you're going to be competing in your applicant pool with other people with 50 quants. So what you want to do is just try to make sure that your application is strong across the board and not rely only on a good quant score to get you in, because that's frankly not uncommon for people in your applicant pool. Incidentally, the largest applicant pool out there is going to be Caucasian males from the U.S. Second largest application pool is Indian males. So if you're a Caucasian male from the U.S. or an applicant from India who is male, you're going to have the largest challenge before you in standing out, because there's just thousands and thousands of more people in the pool that you're competing against. Okay, that kind of gets us to, we're rolling over the top of the hour here, so we've gone a little long, and that seems to be the end of the questions for now. I want to thank everyone for participating. Certainly wish you best of luck in the application process. It's a pain to get through it, but it's worth it. And ask that you reach out to us on the email or 800 number. If you have questions or want to follow up with us, we certainly would love to work with you and try to help position you in the best way possible. And we're really good at that. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And with that, we're going to end the seminar. It's going to cut us off really quickly here. So I want to thank you once again for participating, and we'll look forward to hearing any follow-up questions that you have. Thanks again.